Hello, my name is Diego Barrera, and in this video I'm going through my essay for Dr. Campbell's class. Alrighty, so, 1 second. George McDuffie was a representative from South Carolina. This House report was in direct response to President Andrew Jackson's. Sorry about that. Was in direct response to President Andrew Jackson's 1829 annual message to Congress, in which President Jackson had a strong opposition to the Second Bank of America. He argued that there was excessive concentration of economic power, in addition to his claim that it favored wealthy elites over everyday citizens. For future reference, this message laid out the groundwork for the quote-unquote bank wars. Representative McDuffie argued that the Second Bank of the United States was constitutional and had relied on presented and implied powers. He claimed that the Second Bank of the United States was also economically necessary, vital to the nation's stability, and could help create a more uniform currency for the country. Additionally, he claimed that the Second Bank could help limit the number of loans issued, thereby bringing inflation under control. In both, in which both fields, state banks have failed. One of Representative McDuffie's arguments was that the bank was constitutional and the constitutional power of the Congress to incorporate a bank may be assumed as a. Postulate no longer open the conversation. McDuffie won. He said that the matter of the Second Bank of the United States had been settled through legal means, a Supreme Court ruling with support from multiple administrations, one being President Madison, who originally opposed the bank but later in his career supported it. And both the great political parties have solemnly pronounced it to be constitutional. McDuffie also argued that Congress did not need explicit authority to create the Second Bank because it had already had implied powers. The power of creating a corporation is one of the lowest attributes of a sovereign power. Congress already possesses the constitutional authority to collect revenue and regulate currency. McDuffie was arguing that the creation of a national bank was a necessity and would help Congress carry the powers already bestowed upon them. We're under the most solemn constitutional obligation to restore the disordered currency. He framed the creation of the bank as a duty they had to complete and not as a choice they could make. Representative McDuffie successfully presented the bank not as a unconstitutional overreach, but as a logical extension of the power already bestowed to Congress. One of Representative McDuffie's arguments was that economically, without the bank, the nation would suffer financially and fall into chaos. Before the bank, he laid out the issue with state banks issuing. He laid out the issue with state banks issuing excessive paper money. The circulating medium had reached the adjutant aggregate amount of $110 million. It had been reduced to $45 million. Through these statements, Representative McDuffie argued that shortly following the War of 1812, severe economic instability hit the United States. Additionally, when circulating medium fell from $100 to $10 million to $110 million to $45 million, then suddenly reduced. The sudden reduction I'm so sorry about this. Distorted prices, which also caused fluctuations in quality and value of the currency, interfere between debtors and creditors. Representative McDuffie emphasized the importance of a national currency, insisting that the country's economic stability depended on a medium of exchange that can retain its value nationwide. Excuse me, sorry. Oh, my place. He thinks the nation should possess the currency of equal value, credit, and use wherever it may circulate. If we focus on wherever it may circulate, McDuffie was able to tie together financial stability with our nation's unity. He also was trying to share how shared currency can not only prevent individual states from manipulating their own currencies for their own gain, but also bring unity, fairness, and coherence to the union. The opposition to the Second Bank of America emerged most prominently from President Andrew Jackson and his supporters. Jackson believed that the banks threatened the people's liberty because of its great power and influence over the nation. In his correspondence with James A. Hamilton, Jackson discussed some alternatives to the bank, including the creation of a public bank without any associated stockholders. While it is true that the bank would provide various services to the government, many of its critics were also fearful of the power it wielded. As Hamilton said of the institution in his reply to Jackson, yet this bank renders important services to the government and the country. Jackson Hamilton 5. Despite the services the bank performed for the government, Jackson's supporters believed that any institution with significant financial power could become corrupt, acting in its own interest rather than those of the people. Thus, Jackson and his supporters were committed to preventing such scenarios from emerging as a threat to the democratic government and the people. Beyond the political discussion of the bank's merit and demerits, the debate surrounding the bank became a major topic of discussion in the political newspaper of the Times. Jackson's supporters used the newspaper to attack the bank and sway public opinion. One of the most important of these newspapers was the Washington Globe, in which was committed to Jackson's view and those of his Democratic Party. The Global published articles encouraging readers to support Jackson's viewpoint. For example, viewpoint on the bank. For example, the newspaper encourages readers to become more familiar with Jackson's political speeches than those of his opponents. These newspapers swayed public opinion regarding the bank and arguments for and against its establishment. Thus, they played an important influential role in the discussion of the bank and its significance to the United States at the time. At the time, letters written by those in support of the bank revealed their understanding of the role of the newspaper and the political figures working against the bank. For instance, in the letter written to Nicole Biddle by James Robertson stated the editor of the Richmond Enquirer, Thomas Ritchie, is a very singular character who continues to publish attacks against the bank in his newspaper. Robertson claimed that Ritchie and the other newspaper editors working against the bank are largely based on political opposition of individuals opposed to the bank. Thus, Roberts' statement indicates the media's role in the issuing support surrounding the bank, as well as the role of misinformation from those same media outlets may play in shaping public opinion regarding the bank. Bank officials were therefore attentive to these newspapers and to the bank's discussion appearing in them. Other letters written by the bank officials also revealed how the institution attempted to respond to these corruptions and influential agitations. For instance, Thomas Cadwallader, one of the bank's senior officers, wrote to Nicholas Biddle to explain his knowledge of loans made to newspaper printers. Cadwell wrote that the earliest intimation I had on the subject was about fortnight ago. These types of documents helped reveal the extent to which the conflict regarding the banks is political. Cadwallader was aware of the criticism the bank was receiving in the American public and political leaders. Furthermore, his statement indicated Cadwallader's efforts on the bank leadership to defend itself against those criticisms. The bank board of directors also attempted to defend the bank against Jackson's accusations. One of the reports published by the bus directors was in 1883. In 1833, reporters explained that the bank ensured it provided information favorable to the president and unfavorable to the politicians who were attacking the bank. For example, the text in the official gazette announced the fate of the dismissed secretary to all those who follow him. This type of publication of the bank report indicates that the organization attempted to defend itself and explain its actions to the American public. Furthermore, the publication of this report demonstrates the bank's attempt to justify its place within the American financial system. Thus, the actions taken against the bus directors attempted to refute the accusation made against Andrew Jackson by the bank's enemies and to justify their continued importance to the American economy. The issues surrounding the bank war revealed that there was more to debate over the Second Bank of the United States than the financial dispute between supporters and opponents of the bank. Those who support the bank argue its constitutional essential role in preventing the economic instability caused by state banks. Those who oppose the bank, however, felt that it represented a dangerous accumulation of economic power in the few wealthy individuals who comprised the nation's elites, and that its power threatened the nation's democratic government. President Jackson and his supporters believed that the bank's economic power could lead to corruption that would harm the nation's interests of the nation's citizens. Thus, these differences of views on the bank explain why the bank was such an important issue within the nation during this period. Overall, the bank war reflects the issues regarding the power of the economy within the nation and the future of a nation's democracy. Alrighty, so now I'm going to be going over the main concept, evidence, and quotes that I have selected and explain them. So, for my first body paragraph, I chose the constitutional power of Congress to incorporate a bank no longer open to controversy. And additionally, I chose one of the lowest attributes of sovereign power. So, the reason why I chose these two was because I would have to say because it was kind of like explaining, like, especially the last one, how establishing the bank was kind of like a basic and expected of Congress, and it wasn't like irrational to think; it was actually rational. And additionally, how in the first one, I feel like he was already like, no, this is kind of like the evidence of it, and there's no like conversation about how it can, and about how Congress is or isn't allowed to make the bank. So I feel like that's how I felt, at least when I was reading it. And then for the second body paragraph, I chose the quote 110 million reduced to 45 millions, and currency of equal value wherever it may circulate. So the reason why I chose those, because we know those are hard numbers and hard facts. That's something that can be shown, and that isn't somebody's opinion. So the 110 million reduced to 45 million, that's something that you can't really disprove, and that's easily provable. So that's hard evidence that it's hard evidence. And then the wherever it may circulate, well, the economic stability of the nation kind of also goes hand in hand with the union stability and the national unity. So it's like, if one nation can't all have economic stability together, then that doesn't show that it's a unified nation. And then for my third body paragraph, I chose this bank renders important services. I chose this because it was like something I felt like, even like people who were against the bank, they were like, all right, this is what it is. It's the importance of the bank. Like, and I'm not the bank. It's we can't really argue against the creation of the bank because of how useful it is and how it is within Congress's power to do that. And then with my fourth paragraph, the quote that I used kind of was showing how the Globe was promoting only Jackson's views and wasn't really showing both sides of it, and it was enabling the bank war, and how it wasn't really showing both sides, and how it was encouraging people to read up on Jackson's view and not his opponents. And then for my final paragraph, I chose my quotes because it showed bias and frustration towards the media, and how outside observers saw, like, wait, they're being what's the word, biased. They're not showing the whole both sides, so they're making us feel a certain way about one thing when we should really be um, have the full view of the situation. And yeah, thank you.